What's up, guys? How we doing? A little different angle there today. I got to stay. A couple little things I want to update here. The second jazz journal, I think I'm going to call it actually a Shepherd's Journal, because I think there's another jazz journal. The second Shepherd's Journal, I've been working hard on it. It's going to feature all the great drummers who led sessions and made records on the great jazz labels in the 1950s into about 1965. So that takes us from Chick Webb all the way to Tony Williams. And we talk about a lot of great drummers. Some of them were band leaders and were outstanding. Others were more session guys that small labels were looking for a name that they could put on a record that would sell. And so there's numerous guys that got sessions that were a small label looking for names. So they give a drummer these records as leaders. And the drummers are actually great at picking artists, musicians for their records. They know who they want to groove with. You know, that's what a drummer's main concern is going to be. So the Jazz Journal, Shepherd's Journal number 2, will be out in probably about 10 days. For those of you who don't know about the journal, it's on my Patreon page. For subscription as low as $5 a month, you'll have access to a whole lot more of me reviewing records themed for each episode, some special feature pieces. My friend Jean-Michel Beethoven is going to do a great piece. My friend Wolfgang Pointner is going to do a piece. My friend Adam is going to do a piece again. I think Ken's going to also contribute another piece on some of the drummers I'm not covering from the later era. I know Ken's awfully busy, but it's going to be a great episode, and we're trying to grow it. And so if you want to see some great knowledgeable jazz minds, aside from my own, you know, you guys get plenty of me here, I'm sure. But my friend Jean-Michel, my friend Adam, these guys are knowledgeable guys who Adam managed a lot. I mean, Jean-Michel managed a lot of the greats in Europe for decades. And Adam played in New York and was taught by a lot of the greats, played a lot of the greats' basses, played with a lot of the greats in New York, and has been a figure on the scene here in Minnesota for the last 10 years, educator, teacher, and still playing with young kids. These guys are worthwhile checking out. So the Jazz Journal is going to be a worthy item to subscribe to, and you're already getting a lot of free content here from me. Help me support this. You know, unemployment's going to be reduced here. We're getting by. My wife's working with the homeless. Rochester City needs her, so she's doing her thing, but we can't be a one-income family. If I want to maintain sharing this jazz knowledge, doing my research, and presenting to you and pulling out all these records, I need you guys' help. Thank you to everyone who has contributed. It's been much appreciated. I actually got my first little payout, $300, the first money I've made doing all this YouTube stuff. I haven't made a cent yet from YouTube. I got some money accruing, but they don't pay you until you make $100. So in 3 months of being monetized at YouTube, I still haven't made a cent. And that's partly because a lot of my videos get shared revenues, or they take all the revenues because I'm dropping music for you guys. So if you guys are learning and you appreciate what the effort I'm putting in, if you have it, you know what I mean, obviously other people are tight as well. There's no sweat, there's no pressure. If you ain't got it, enjoy the content that's here for free anyway. But the Jazz Journal, I'm trying to make it worth your time. I'm giving you guys great guest artists. We're going to do great columns, in-depth, knowledgeable people. And of course, I'm going to do a feature each month. And this month is going to be on the great drummers. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you guys. The next thing I want to share real quick is the concept I'm working on for my next series. And these are records all from 1955 that were recorded and released in 1955. Here, of course, is going to be on this series. I want you guys to get a grasp of what it was like to walk into a good record store, and that's the key, a good record store, because a lot of these records weren't going to be nationally distributed. A lot of these records weren't going to be available coast to coast. Okay, so you're in Chicago, New York, LA to see all what I'm about to show you. But I'm going to show you 30 records that were recorded in 1955 and released in 1955. And remember, the labels are spewing out all that backlog, 78 era, 10-inch era stuff on LP. So there's a lot of stuff coming out from the labels. But the amount of stuff that's actually recorded in 55 and released in 55 is actually, it's a down year for releases. But what I want to do is, in the 30 albums I'm going to show you here, I'm going to try to grasp for you what was the cutting edge, what was happening in jazz in 55. And we're done talking about these 30 records, I'm hoping we can have kind of a look at where this music was in 55 and the changes that were going to come, and just to see the innovations as it was taking place, where those innovations were happening, and by who. I think it's going to be fun and insightful, and hopefully I continue to learn making these like I did with the sax stuff. That sax stuff was a lot of work. I put a lot of time, 3 weeks of my life, every day pulling records, putting records back, doing research on these guys. I knew a lot of the story, but I needed some of the details and filling all that in. It's like I had homework every now and then. Like, I got to go look up 10 guys tonight. I'll do 7 tonight, 3 in the morning before I start my episode. It was a lot of work, but it was also fun. And I felt like I was living in a time frame for a little bit there. It was pretty fantastic in a way. The other thing I want to show you real quick is I just redid my 10-inch case here. And I did them all so that Gert Goldblatt, fantastic Bethlehem 10 inches were showing. It's a great series of covers that they do. And there's more over here as well. Just look at these great covers. The zebra, the owl, the skyscraper, the puma. It's pretty cool stuff. And so I just wanted to show you that. I was kind of bored. And so I started rearranging my 10 inches. And I ended up like, hey, let's put all the coolest Bethlehem covers together. And I kind of had fun doing it. And this is my 10-inch case. And there's probably 150 10 inches in there. They're kind of lined up on the edges. And then I display some. It's a pretty cool case. Probably not what my wife would have done with it, but I'm good at working with Craigslist. What can I say? What we're doing? We're of course going to finish up the top 10 of the great sax players tomorrow. We're just kind of having a little fun today. Time taking a break. I got some things I got to take care of this weekend. But we've got a great top 10 coming, and it's been quite a journey. I've learned a lot. Been blown away by the importance of Lionel Hampton, the recruiter. It's really been interesting to me. And he was given that chance by Goodman to play with the white group and get his name out there and become a crossover success. And his records were on major labels. He became a pretty big star, Lionel Hampton. And boy, did he make the most of that. He really took every opportunity he could to be the Art Blakey of his day and bring every young kid with talent he could find into his orchestra. Develop that talent, teach them the business, and then have them matriculate on into the jazz world. And he brought more kids in. And the number of guys that play with Lionel Hampton, 43, play with Lionel Hampton, 50, it blew me away. So hats off to Lionel Hampton. Not only was he one of the greatest players ever on any instrument, he reinvents the vibraphone in every essence of the word. He was a great drummer as well. But Lionel Hampton, turns out, was one of the great professors, shepherds of young jazz talent, and having that platform given to him by Benny Goodman, he made absolutely the most of it. And half that list, it seemed like, had to put a feather in his cap as a thank you. So I didn't know that. I was surprised by how many guys in the white jazz camps played with Woody Herman and Stan Kenton. And I knew, but I didn't know. It was prolific. It was crazy. And it's been Lionel Hampton here, followed by Billy Eckstein probably, and then Dizzy Gillespie. And like Kenton and Herman, these groups are a little more contemporary with the modern era. You know, the Goodmans, some of the Whiteman stuff, some of the, you know, a lot of the big swig bands. It's more 30s, into the 40s, of course. But what was happening with the Woody Herman, Stan Kenton was happening in the mid to late 40s. So the young kids were in those groups, and that was same with the Eckstein, the Dizzy Gillespie bands. These bands were happening at that time, and Lionel Hampton's kind of happening throughout all of that. And one of the other real interesting things I've discovered, and I kind of knew, but now I really know, is just how big of an imprint on modern jazz Count Basie has. From rhythm sections to sax players, trumpet players, arrangers, composers, big groups, small groups, swing space. He's such an architect. And he also houses guys that were huge stars in their own right, but they always wanted to come back to Basie for a while. You know, it seems like just probably one of the funnest places to be. And your personality was allowed to kind of shine and develop under Basie. He didn't have to kind of rein you in like a Goodman was more known for. Basie seems like the Wild West in a way, you know. And those guys worked so hard, touring the country, playing graduations and school dances, and these black bands just didn't have the doors open for them that the white bands did. Made a fraction of the money, watched these white guys becoming famous, and they really were making pennies on the dollar. It has to sting in some way, and like I said, history is corrected by remembering far more of the black musicians than the white ones. That was really apparent doing the 50 white sax players, how many of those guys had slipped into obscurity, in spite of how great they were, not in spite of how popular they really were, selling probably 5 times what the black artists did. Now the black artists have been selling for 5 decades, and the white guys have become forgotten, and the black guys have become the institution and the canon, as they should be in most instances. But it's been so informative. One of the other things I kind of have been gleaning was in the black artists here, we're at 80 in. I've done my research on some more already, and these top 20 I know pretty well. You know, actually we're 90 in. We got 10 to go. And looking at our top 20 artists, I started staring at the piles the other day, just breaking down some of the mathematics in my head. And almost all the guys in this era, it's a stack of stuff. Sadly, my Ben Webster pile, which is coming, is a little smaller than it should be. He's a guest on a lot of other records with Coleman Hawkins and guys, Sweets Edison, but I need more Ben Webster records. But I looked at the breakdown of who the remaining 20 were, and you look at the labels that were represented by those 20 saxophone players, and it led me to wonder, to query, were the labels making these artists successful, or was the saxophone player making a label successful? What drove what? And like, for example, of the top 20 guys, 10 of them were on Blue Note for at least a record, and some of them were at Blue Note for a long time. Is it because sax players started to dominate jazz that Blue Note ascended? Or is it because the fact these guys were on Blue Note, that's elevated their reputations above other players? Prestige, 9 of the 20 record on Prestige, at least for a record, some for a long time. Both Prestige and Blue Note have become the kind of standard bearers for the modern day collector. And I'll tell you something, if you look at where those labels ranked in terms of sales, distribution, and power in the record industry in 1955, Blue Note and Prestige are way down the line. Contemporary, Pacific, Clef Norgran, Columbia Capital. There's so many labels that were doing big things, predominantly with white artists. But these two little small black labels out of New York now seem so elevated in our mind's eye that we imagine them being the jazz landscape. And the reality is that they weren't. These were locally distributed records in black neighborhoods that over time, the rumor, the word, the mythology has spread of, man, that guy expressed some powerful angst, pain, sorrow. And a lot of times people don't even know what they're hearing. It just moves them. And like, this guy really kind of is awesome. And they don't know why. They don't have history to contextualize it all. But you can't help but feel art that has powerful emotion behind it. And so a lot of these labels have ascended in our minds and have now dominated the landscape. And Riverside Records has 6 of these 20 guys on there, at least for a record. Atlantic only has 2. And that's possibly part of why their reputation among the modern day collector isn't as esteemed, in spite of them doing some landmark stuff. Savoy, in 1955, the dawning of the LP era, they have a pretty amazing chunk of sax players coming out, or stuff from their vaults that they're releasing. So 6 of the 20 are on Savoy, and Savoy is a very important label, late 40s, early 50s, into the mid 50s. And then Savoy definitely kind of starts stepping back. But it's interesting seeing these labels juxtaposed for seniority and for innovation and for leading the marketplace and commercial success. It's all very fleeting. It's all very, it shuffles around. Impulse doesn't come around until 1960, yet they still managed to house 6 of these 20 great saxophone players in their canon, all post 1960. Okay, that's pretty impressive, and we have high esteem for Impulse. Verve has 8 of these 20, and the modern day collector is fairly aware of Verve. And so Verve has a lot of these guys in the mid 50s, late 50s. A lot of the greats are all there with Norman Granz. Roost has 3 of these greats, and Roost is kind of on the periphery for the average collector. They don't really know too much about him. Roost also has a couple of the great white sax players. Stan Getz for one. You know, a label like Bethlehem has 0 of the top 20 black saxophone players. They're probably their highest ranked black sax. Oh, sorry, Bethlehem does have a Dexter Gordon record. Take that back, they have 1. But Lucky Thompson has 1 record on Dawn, you know, but he's not top 20. But Bethlehem does have Zoot Sims, who's one of the great white players. You know, you look at these white labels: Bethlehem, Pacific, Contemporary, Fantasy. Those are dominated by white West Coast, Bethlehem East Coast and West Coast, and they really don't have these top 20 black saxophone players at all. And it's no secret that the average collector today gets to Pacific label, the Contemporary label, Bethlehem in their second and third chapter of collecting. They're not starting out looking for great Shelly Manne, Howard Rumsey stuff. You know, it's something you kind of learn as you go into collecting, and you discover that, okay, there's some important stuff happening on the West Coast. But these records were far more successful on the West Coast in terms of sales, distribution, touring, marketability, accessibility, and yet the average day collector today does have very little initial scope when it comes to Contemporaries and Pacifics, the Fantasy label, the Bethlehem label. It's all been fairly interesting. Jubilee does get 1 record by Jackie McLean, so they're kind of on the periphery. But it does seem, VJ has 1, it looks like, with Wayne Shorter. Emercy has 1, Cannibal Adderley. Argo has 3, and Sonny Stitt makes a long string of records at Argo. So it's been interesting kind of looking at the breakdown of the great labels and how they were represented by these top 20 saxophone players, and how in the modern day collector's viewpoint, the most important records and what they think are the most popular and successful records are all kind of driven by the mid 50s, 60s saxophone African American player, largely on prestige and blue note. That's the prestigious stuff people want. And it's if you don't have these top 20 great sax players on your label, it's hard for your label to be recognized. The great piano players, the great other instruments don't seem to really elevate you like having these top 20 sax players does. And the saxophone does seem to dominate the beginners, the people who don't even know, the novices. People don't even know nothing about jazz or care about jazz. When they think of jazz, the first thing that pops into most people's minds is a saxophone. You know, it's just kind of that connected thing. And so I just wanted to share the Shepherd's Journal is coming out, Volume 2. If you got the time and a few bucks, subscribe for $5 a month. It'll be worth it. It's a great. My friends' columns alone, you know, are fresh insight and worthy of your checking them out. Because I'm excited about this new series, looking at what each year would look like in a great record store. You walk into a record store on the Upper West Side in 1955, and you go to the jazz section. This is what would have been there. And I'm going to try to show you what's the cutting edge, leading stuff, not the commercial milky stuff, not the watered down stuff. I'm going to show you what the great labels were doing and how they were pushing the music forward. And I think it's going to be a fun series to look, and hopefully we'll all learn something there as well. But we'll dive in back tomorrow with numbers 10 on down, and then we'll dig into that next series, looking at notable records from year by year from 55, probably to about 65. We'll look at that 10, 12 year period and see what we can discern. So appreciate you guys. Y'all be safe. It's a love affair. If you don't love jazz, you shouldn't watch the Jazz Shepherd. But maybe the Jazz Shepherd can help you love jazz. You know, that's probably the one thing above all. You know, I want to keep it positive, and I want to help people love this music because it's important. It's not just history. It's a powerful art form that expresses the people's sorrow. That if you have the empathy in the ear of understanding, it can move mountains. It can give you strength, faith, confidence to overcome chaos and struggle. Just like the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This music serves the same purpose if you understand the context it was made in. It's let my people go. We're marching out of Europe out of Egypt to the burning bush. That's powerful stuff. I'm the Jazz Shepherd. Peace.